So, how's it going, everyone? Mufari here. Welcome to Heliopolis Radio. And today we've been fortunate enough to be joined by Terry Tucker. I'm not too sure I can describe him as an individual because he has such a vast array of experience and just so many different fields of life that he's explored. But currently, he's the owner of Motivational Check. He's also the author of the book Sustainable Excellent 10 Principles to Lead Your Uncommon and Extraordinary Life. So, Terry, I'll just hand it over to you and introduce yourself and just let us know about you.
Sure. So, Mafaro, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate this opportunity to talk with you this morning. Yeah, I'll try to give you the condensed version. Born and raised on the south side of Chicago in the United States, one of the larger cities in the United States. I'm the oldest of three boys. You can't tell this from looking at me or from my voice, but I'm 6'8" tall, and I actually went to college on a basketball scholarship. When I graduated from college, I moved home to find a job. I'm really going to date myself now, but this is long before the internet was available to help people find employment. Fortunately, I found that first job in the corporate headquarters of Wendy's International, the hamburger chain. Unfortunately, I lived with my parents for the next 3.5 years as I helped my mother care for my father and my grandmother, who were both dying of different forms of cancer. Professionally, like I said, started out at Wendy's, moved to hospital administration after that, made a major pivot in my life and became a police officer. And part of what I did in my law enforcement career was I was a SWAT team hostage negotiator. After my law enforcement career ended, I started a school security consulting business, coached girls high school basketball, became an author in 2020, but for the last 11 years have been battling a rare form of cancer. And then I guess just finally, my wife and I have been married for 30 years. We have one child, a daughter, who's in the military here in the United States.
Incredible. I mean, wow, that's a lot to summarize this. I actually just go into some of the various fields that you're in. So being an athlete, that really brings a different type of mentality. And being a Division I NCAA athlete, most of those individuals are looking to somehow break into maybe the NBA, NFL. So I just wanted to ask, how did that shape you in terms of your character growing up? Did it bring a certain level of discipline from a young age, or it was just natural gifts? You were just talented in sports and you just said, why not? Let me just give it a go for fun.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I had a little bit of a natural gift. I was 6'5" tall when I was 13 years old. But that was great for me. It was not great, to be a middle school kid because I was teased a lot, because I was different. And so instead of, saying, woe is me and this is terrible, I put my attention into practicing basketball. And that got me to the point where, the more I practiced, the better I got. The better I got, the more I wanted to practice. And so I had a great opportunity that I wasn't gonna squander. I wanted to be good. I wanted to be the best. And Chicago being a large city, I played against a lot of really good players who ended up going and playing in the NBA. And I actually got to play against Michael Jordan my senior year in college.
Wow.
Yeah, it was his freshman year in college. And the year his team, North Carolina, won the national championship in basketball here in the United States.
That's probably every basketball athlete's dream to have even shared the court with someone who would go on to achieve what he did. And that just is a testament to the skill that you had yourself. And I was just wondering, what kind of shifted your attention away from sports and more into the corporate side of things? Was it more you just maybe lost interest? Was it a circumstantial thing, or was it that you had certain obligations that you couldn't give your full attention to sport?
Well, I took sports as far as I could, to be honest with you. I had, 3 knee surgeries in high school and another knee surgery in college. So there was just no way I was going to be able to physically stand up to an 82 game NBA season or even more games with the playoffs. So I never defined myself as a basketball player. It's what I did. It's what I loved. I think it was a purpose in my life at a point in time. But then that purpose switched. And I always felt my purpose in terms of a job or an occupation was to be in law enforcement, which begs the question, well, your first two jobs were in business. But there's a little bit of a backstory. My grandfather was a Chicago police officer from 1924 to 1954 and was actually shot in the line of duty with his own gun. It was not a serious injury, he was shot in the ankle. But my dad, who was an infant at the time, always remembered the stories my grandmother told of that knock on the door, Mrs. Tucker, grab your son, come with us, your husband's been shot. So when I expressed an interest in going into law enforcement, my dad was absolutely not. You're going to college, you're going to major in business, you're going to get out, get a great job, get married, have 2.4 kids and live happily ever after. But that's what my dad wanted me to do. That's not what I felt my purpose was. And as I mentioned, my dad was dying of cancer when I graduated from college. So I had a choice. I could have said, sorry, Dad, I'm going to go blaze my own trail and do my own thing. Or out of love and respect for you, I will do what you want me to do. And so that's what I did. I took jobs in business because my dad wanted me to. And I waited until my father passed away. And then I followed my own dreams.
Wow, that's very powerful. And just before we move on to the next question, just coming back to law enforcement, what is it about law enforcement that was so appealing to you? Because I remember growing up, it's funny, I'm 26 now, but I remember I always wanted to go into the military. I always wanted to, there was something about, there was like a valiance and an honor. But you look at it from a mature eye and you see what people really go through in those fields. Like I have a friend of mine who's ex-army as well, ex-military. There's a lot of difficulty and adversity, and so I'm just wondering what inclined you so much to move into a field that's quiet, and being a SWAT negotiator, which is an impeccable achievement. I'm sure there's a certain level of intensity to that job that is just not for most normal people. Not normal people, but the average person wouldn't want to go.
No, you were right with normal people. That was a good word.
Yeah, no, like what inclines you, to go into something that intense?
In all honesty, I think in one word, service. You want to make a commitment. You want to give back. It's not about, arresting people. It's not about, putting people in jail and things like that. It's about making a difference in your community. And I think that's one thing I learned in sports, especially team sports. For me, it was team sports. I think it can be whatever team you're on. But what I learned in team sports was the importance of being part of something that's bigger than yourself. You realize on a team that if you don't do your job, not only do you let yourself down, but you let your teammates down, your coaches down, your fans down, etc. And if you think about it, the biggest team game that we all play is this game of life. So I wanted to be in law enforcement, not because I wanted to shoot anybody, not because I wanted to take people to jail, not because I wanted to, violate their rights, but because I wanted to make a difference in the community in which I live.
Wow, and really well spoken on that. And now, obviously, this is much more of a personal, and I guess this is kind of the crux of it. So your battle with cancer, which was extended 10 years, I believe, or it was 10 years exactly. But I just wanted to understand, maybe if you could explain to the viewers what I can't even pronounce it probably.
Litiginous
melanoma. Apologies for the pronunciation there. It's a tongue slip on that one. But could you maybe explain the nature of that type of cancer and basically your experience with it?
Sure. So most people think of melanoma as too much exposure to the sun, and it affects the melanin, the pigment in our skin. And it's been almost 11 years now. 2012, I was a girls' high school basketball coach in Texas, here in the United States, and I had a callus break open on the bottom of my foot, right below my third toe. And initially, I didn't think much of it because as a coach, you're on your feet a lot. But after it not healing for a few weeks, I made an appointment and went to see a podiatrist, a foot doctor friend of mine. And he took an x-ray and he said, Terry, I think you have a cyst in there and I can cut it out. And he did. And he showed it to me. It was just a little gelatin sac with some white fat in it. No dark spots, no blood, nothing that gave either one of us concern. But fortunately, or unfortunately, he sent it off to have it looked at. And then 2 weeks later, I received a call from him. And as I mentioned, he was a friend of mine.
Yeah.
And the more difficulty he was having explaining to me what was going on, the more frightened I was becoming, until finally he just laid it out for me. He said, Terry, I've been a doctor for 25 years. I have never seen the form of cancer that you have. You have this rare form of melanoma, which is called acrolitiginous malignant melanoma. And he said, because your cancer is so rare, he recommended I go to a particular cancer hospital. And at the time I was diagnosed, melanoma was a death sentence. They really, the only thing they had to offer me in terms of treatment was surgery. There were no drugs, no medications that they could give me. So they put me on a weekly injection of a drug called interferon to help keep the disease from coming back. The side effects of the interferon were that it gave me severe flu-like symptoms for 2 to 3 days every week after each injection. And I took those weekly injections for almost 5 years. So imagine having the flu every week for 5 years. And as I said, that wasn't a cure. That was, as my oncologist used to say, we're trying to kick the can down the road and buy you some more time for additional therapies to come available. So that was kind of how it started out. In addition, I've had my left foot amputated, and I had my left leg amputated right in the middle of the COVID pandemic. And I also have tumors in my lungs right now, which I'm being treated for. As a matter of fact, I just finished another week of treatment yesterday. So it's just been an ongoing battle for the last 11 years.
It's a lot to take in. And I guess the thing you can only ask is your mental process as you've battled this disease for this long, because when adversity strikes people in life, everyone has their different forms. I think the mentality aspect is really what defines the journey. And so I just don't know if you'd willingly share how your mental process has been throughout this whole journey.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And I think you kind of hit the nail right on the head with that, because, if you can't control this, you're not going to be able to control any of this. And I think being able to control your mind, to callous your mind. The Cleveland Clinic here in the United States, was a major healthcare organization, did a study on your brain. And what they came to the conclusion is that we have 60 to 70,000 thoughts that pass through our mind every day. About 95% of those thoughts are the same thoughts as yesterday, which means on any given day, we have about 3,500 new thoughts that pass through our mind. And the interesting thing they found out was that your brain operates at the speed of about 1,000 words a minute. Now, I don't know about you, but I can't read that fast. I can't think that fast. But I mean, that's an incredibly powerful thing. But having said all that, your mind can still only hold one thought at a time. Mm-hmm. Why would you want to make that a negative thought? And so I learned early on, and I think I learned this even before I had cancer, when I was having knee surgery. When I went back playing basketball after my 3 knee surgeries in high school, I remember my brain was putting all kinds of negative thoughts into my mind. Things like, hey, you're probably a step slower, and college coaches aren't going to be interested in recruiting you. And I realized, no, wait a minute, I'm still playing at an elite level, and college coaches are still reaching out about the possibility of playing for their schools. I learned early on that I needed to change the negative into something positive, because we all become what we think.
I mean, really, again, I'm not trying to be repetitive in my words, but it's really well spoken, because, pain is a very difficult thing. I think we underestimate it. We live in a world where masculinity in particular, they kind of promote the sense that, pain is one of those things you can just transcend, but to go through pain, especially when you've been either, if you're physically ill or if you've suffered an emotional trauma, people don't really understand what it actually is to be in pain. And so I was going to ask you, in terms of just how you manage to sustain your motivation and your drive, what do you still draw strength from in times when your body is not feeling up to it, or maybe, you have the traumas of what you've gone through, you recollect on some of the things that you've had to lose along the way, and how it's affected your life. So I know it's a very deep question, but I think that's a very important thing to address, because I know there are many people who may be in a similar situation or have gone through similar situations, but they haven't really looked at themselves and seen like what they use to kind of get through pain and how to handle, not even get through it, to live with pain, more importantly, to live with it.
I guess I'll answer that with a story. The college that I went to was a military college. And one year we had a president of the college who was an admiral, former admiral in the Navy. And he had been a fighter pilot during the Vietnam War back in the 1960s and 1970s. And he was shot down flying a mission over North Vietnam. And he was a prisoner of war for 8 years. And he was beaten and tortured, and all kinds of things happened to him. And I did not spend a lot of time around him, but I remember being at an event with him. And somebody asked him, who were the people that survived that brutality, that torture? And he said, well, let me tell you who didn't survive it. He said, it wasn't the big, strong, tall, tough guys that thought that they could handle any kind of abuse or torture. And he said, the other group that didn't survive, and this kind of surprised me, were the optimists. These were the people that thought they were going to be rescued or let go by Thanksgiving or Christmas or Easter. And Thanksgiving, Christmas, and Easter would come and go, and they wouldn't be rescued. And those people died of a broken heart. He said the people that survived were the people who understood what they could control and controlled it, which according to him was basically our breathing and the thoughts in our mind. He said everything else was at the discretion of the enemy. When we slept, when we ate, when we got tortured, when we got mail, when we got exercise, that was all at the discretion of the enemy. And I think the problem today is people try to control so many things that are outside of their control. There's no way you're going to control that. So if you realize what you can control, which may be your attitude, may be your effort, things like that, and control those things, you'll be, all that anxiety, all that, oh my gosh, look at all the bad things that are happening to me. You'll realize that those things out of your control, you just let go and you focus on the things that you can control. And one of the ways to get better at dealing with pain, and this is going to sound kind of weird, but I do this every day of my life. Do one thing. Doesn't have to be a big thing, but do one thing that scares you, that makes you nervous, that makes you uncomfortable, that's potentially embarrassing. Like I said, it doesn't have to be a big thing, but if you do those small things every day, when the big disasters in life hit us, and they hit all of us, we lose somebody who's close to us, we get let go from our job, we find out we have a chronic or a terminal illness, you'll be so much more resilient to handle that pain when it presents itself.
Very, very wise words. And it's interesting that you mentioned it, because I was watching a video where, you and David Goggins have a lot of the same type of, that same honest truth is about how life, the society we live in, it kind of promotes this idea that, the world is always nice and things always, but in truth, this is a very difficult life. And it's not being negative to say that, it's being truthful to see that. And you only realize that when you come to witness and experience a great deal of pain yourself. And so I was going to ask, moving with that, you wrote your book, Sustainable Excellence. What inspired you to write the book, and what are the 10 principles? Without going into detail, obviously people need to read it to understand. Would you want to just maybe elaborate on those?
Sure. So, what got me to write the book? In one word, God. There's an old joke here that it says when we talk to God, it's called prayer. When God talks to us, it's called schizophrenia. So God has never talked to me, by any means whatsoever. But what I think God does is he puts people in our path that make the same suggestion over and over and over. And people were saying, you should write a book, you should write a book. And I was like, no, I'm not an author. I don't feel, I'm set up to be successful writing a book. But more and more people suggested that. And so I think I'm smart enough when a number of people say the same thing that I should kind of take a look at it. So what really kind of sparked the book were two conversations I had. One was with a former player that I had coached in high school who had moved to the area in the United States where my wife and I live with her fiance. And the four of us had dinner one night. And I remember saying to her after dinner, I'm really excited that you're living close and I can watch you find and live your purpose. She got real quiet for a while. And then she looked at me and she said, well, Coach, what do you think my purpose is? I said, I have no idea what your purpose is, but that's what your life should be about. Finding the reason you were put on the face of this earth, using your unique gifts and talents and living that reason. So that was one conversation. And then I had a young man reach out to me on social media and ask me what I thought were the most important things that he should learn, not to just be successful in his job or in business, but to be successful in life. And I didn't want to give him, get up early, work hard, help others kind of stuff. Not that those aren't important. Those are very important. But I wanted to see if I could go deeper. So I spent some time and eventually came up with these 10 thoughts, these 10 ideas, these 10 principles. And so I sent them to him. And then I stepped back and I was like, well, I got a life story that fits underneath that principle. And I know people who emulate this principle. So literally during the 3 to 4 month period where I was healing after I had my leg amputated, I sat down at the computer every day and I built stories, and they're real stories about real people underneath each of the principles. And that's how the book came to be. And I'll just give you a couple of the principles that I think are really important to me. And they're not in any order. Number 1 is not any more important than number 7 or anything like that. But one of the principles, and I've done this in my life, you probably have too, most of us have, are that most people think with their fears and their insecurities instead of using their minds. And I know I've done that. It's been like, oh, I want to do that. Oh, wait a minute. Maybe I'm not smart enough, or maybe I don't have enough information, or what will people think about me if I fail? That's thinking with our fears and our insecurities. That's not thinking with our minds. And I always tell young people, especially when I talk to them in person, if there's something in your heart, something in your soul that you believe you're supposed to do, but it scares you, go ahead and do it. Because at the end of your life, the things you're going to regret are not going to be the things you did. They're going to be the things you didn't do. And by then it's going to be too late to go back and do them. So that's one principle. There's a principle about listening, and I learned this from being a hostage negotiator. And I'm sure your audience is like, well, listening, of course. You dummy, everybody knows how to listen, and it's like, but they don't. What I'm talking about is listening to understand versus listening to respond. And Mufaro, if you're talking and I'm like, hurry up and say what you're going to say because I want to get my 2 cents in, that's listening to respond. As opposed to you say something, I may agree with you, I may not agree with you, but I want to understand where you're coming from. Help me to understand why you believe that or why you feel that way or what experience led you to feel this way. And that's listening to understand. And if we would do a better job of that around the world, I think we would be a whole lot better as human beings. So those are 2 big ones that I think are really important.
The last 2 questions on that, I think if people really could tune in, those 2 things are very, very important. I think those 2 points can take you very far in life just on those by themselves. What essence do you want people to draw from the book? Everyone reads something, but the meaning is completely different. But I think there's some type of universal principle that can be taken from something. And what would that be when people read the book? What would you want them to really take into their hearts more than anything?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's always interesting for me as an author when people reach out because there's these 10 principles, and there's always one principle that resonates with the reader, whether they did it or whether they want to do it or whatever it ends up being. So whenever they reach out there, that's the starting point for our conversation. It's like, hey, principle number 7 really resonated with me because of this. And so it's an opportunity to start a conversation. And really that's what I wanted to do with the book. I don't purport to have all the answers. I'm not some guru or anything like that. I've just been through a lot of stuff, and that stuff has taught me things. And I just wanted to put that out there to get people to start talking about it and not to be afraid of it and things like that. So if the book can generate a conversation, or it can generate you thinking a little bit more about one of those principles in your life, then for me, that book has been successful.
No. And can people, so it's available on Amazon, and are there any other mediums for people perhaps outside of the US? If you have an audience that may be wanting to access it from this side in Southern Africa or Europe, what mediums and channels have you put the book on?
My publisher actually took care of all that, so I don't know exactly where, but from what people have told me, and I've been fortunate enough to do podcasts all over the world, that if you just go on, if you Google Sustainable Excellence and Terry Tucker, it'll probably pop up somewhere where you can get the book. I know, Amazon all over the world has it. Barnes & Noble is another bookstore. Apple iBooks, you can get it on that as well. So pretty much wherever you can get a book online, you can get Sustainable Excellence.
All right. For the viewers that tune in, I'll place a link in the video below, and you should be able to access it from there. And so thanks so much for just touching in on the book. And I'm actually going to buy it myself. I need to get myself and actually get it because, your story was not trying to be, overly sympathetic or anything like that. But I think, just from also having faced my own various adversities, it always resonates to see someone share themselves so openly and so truthfully. That's very tough. And so that was actually going to move me into the next question, is your perspective on adversity. I think everyone learns something through challenges and difficulties, but I mean, yours has been quite the mountain to climb. Everyone's not saying your adversity is worse than someone else's, it's not comparing, but there's always an intensity scale to it. And so what have you learned about yourself throughout this journey, throughout this battle, and not just the battle with cancer, but all the other challenges that you've had in life? I'm sure, being a father comes with its own challenges, being a business partner, being whatever you do, being an athlete, there's always adversity that you've had to face. And so I was just wondering how you've seen yourself grow and what you've learned through those things.
Yeah, I'll tell you another story that I think can answer that question. I had a nurse recently ask me, what it was like to have my foot amputated and to have my leg amputated. And I told her it has not been easy. When you're 6'8" and trying to learn how to walk again is incredibly difficult. I spend most of my time in a wheelchair just because it's easier for me with my cancer treatments and that. But what I told her was, cancer can take all of my physical faculties, but cancer can't touch my mind, it can't touch my heart, and it can't touch my soul. And that's who I am. That's who you are, Mafaro. That's who everybody who's listening to us is. And I spent a lot of time in my life using my physical body, playing sports and, being in law enforcement and things like that. And I spent a lot of time on this physical body, eating right, not abusing drugs and alcohol, exercising and things like that. And I'm not telling you not to do any of those stuff. Yes, you should exercise, you should eat right, you should get enough sleep, you should reduce stress, all the things we know that helps our body to stay healthy. But what I am suggesting is this. Maybe instead of spending so much time on your physical body, you should spend some time every day on your heart, your mind, and your soul. And the reason I say that is because we all know we're gonna die. And at some point in time, this physical body is gonna die and it's gonna decay. But what lives on is our heart, our mind, and our soul. Those things are eternal. And I don't think we spend a lot of time thinking about those things, developing those things, working on those things. And I'm suggesting that maybe we spend a little more time every day doing that.
Oh, wow. That is, again, very, very, very deep. And I hope that really does resonate with anyone that listens, because that's a very deep fundamental truth, that life and death boundary that's very, very thin. We actually forget about it as humans. But I know that we're actually running short on time. I have 9 minutes left, unfortunately. I mean, there's so many other aspects I'd love to go into with you. And how is this translated into your family life and your family dynamic? Because as humans, we don't live, or at least we shouldn't live primarily just for our own selfish, for our own self. Everything we do has an effect on everyone, so especially those closest to us. So how has this journey evolved, the dynamic between you and your family and you and society as a whole?
I'm very, very lucky. I talk about what I call my 3 F's, which are faith, family, and friends. And I'll tell you another quick story. When I had my leg amputated, my oncologist wanted to put me on chemotherapy. And I was 8 years into this cancer fight. And I said to him, is it gonna save my life? He said, probably not, but it might buy you some more time. And I said, well, if the outcome's gonna be the same, I'm not sure I wanna take the chemotherapy, but I'll go home and talk to my family. So I go home and it's just my wife and daughter and I start telling them what the oncologist wants to do. And my daughter, who was in college at the time, she's like, all right, we need a family meeting. I'm like, family meeting? There's 3 of us. It's not like we got a board here or something like that, So we end up sitting around the kitchen table and individually talking about how we all feel about me taking chemotherapy. And then when we're done, my daughter's like, all right, let's take a vote. How many people want dad to have chemotherapy? And my wife and daughter raise their hand. I'm like, wait a minute. Am I getting outvoted for something that I don't want to do? But I remembered back in the police academy when we were learning defensive tactics, how to defend ourselves. Our defensive tactics instructor used to have us bring a photograph of the people we love the most to class. And as we were learning these different techniques, we were to look at that photograph, because he reasoned you will fight harder for the people you love than you will fight for yourself. So I ended up taking chemotherapy, not because I wanted to, but because I love my family more than I love myself. And in hindsight, it was the right thing to do, because it was a bridge that got me to the drug that I'm on now, that may not save my life, but certainly has bought me 2.5, 3 years of quality life. So my family is incredibly important to me.
That's beautiful. And it's not even, family dynamics are different. Some people, family, it may not be necessarily a wife, a sister. It may just be an uncle and aunt, but I think regardless, even a mentor perhaps, it's just important to have that core foundation that keeps you centered. Because as strong as we are as individuals, some of us, at some point we do fall into that I guess you want to call it darkness, but the heaviness of life, and it's people that kind of pull us out, at least from what you have shared in your experience and even in my own personal experience. And so actually we have one more question so that we can, firstly, how can people reach out to you? Are there any channels? I know you have your LinkedIn, you have your website. Are there any other ways? I know you also run your program as well. Is it the Sustainable Excellence Membership? And so, yes, I was just wondering, are there any other means of contacting you?
Yeah, the best way to contact me is through motivationalcheck.com. I have your thoughts for the day, videos to watch, books to read, things like that. You can leave me a message. And so that's just the easiest and simplest way to do that is motivationalcheck.com.
Just for my personally, I also just wanted to extend my thanks to you for joining the podcast. Really, the way, there's certain people in this life that you meet that just have a certain exuberance. It's kind of like a light, and you can tell, I'm not trying to be overly religious or anything like that, but you can see where God works with people, you know what I mean? And your journey has been incredibly difficult, but just the way that you have, just handled it and the way you've shared it with the world so gracefully, it takes a very special person. I don't know, you haven't coached me before, but I already feel like just saying, yes, coach. I don't know, it just came to me subconsciously, but no, I really did want to extend from the bottom of my heart, sincerely, thank you for overcoming the adversity that you've had. I think a lot of people can take something from this, especially in the world that we're living in, which is so ripe with adversity. Someone's, your happy day, someone else's very miserable day, the cycle of life. It's as painful as that. But I think really for those of you that tune in, there's a powerful message you can take from this. It's not just about strength, it's really about taking things as they are. No one preaches that message anymore. Like you said, the controlling thing, maybe we try to create things that aren't, but then there are very few people that teach you how to face life as it comes, and you're definitely one of them, Terry. So I just wanted to say thank you. I hope to have you on the podcast again. This time having read the book so that I'm now fully in the loop and I'm completely clueless. I'm sorry about that.
No, that's fine.
Truly, we really appreciate the fact that people like you exist in this world. And I hope that you continue to do the work that you do. And I hope that people tune into the podcast and actually draw some message and inspiration, because that's really what it's about. But thank you for sharing your amazing, beautiful story. And I'm wishing you all the best in your future moving forward. There's a certain radiance to you. And so I know it's all good.
Well, Mafaro, thanks for having me on it. I always say it's nice people like you that allow me to come on and have a conversation with them. And if that conversation makes a positive difference in somebody's life, then as far as I'm concerned, today's been a really good day.
Last question. NBA, who do you have winning the finals? It's already 3-1 for Denver.
I live in Denver, so you absolutely know that I am rooting for the Denver Nuggets. So, I got to do it. I'm from Chicago, so I'm a big Bulls fan. But right now, I'm actually taking the Nuggets.
The Nuggets. No, you think Jimmy Butler might not be able to turn the series around? It's too late.
If Denver can't hold on and win one more game before the Heat can win 3 more games, then they don't deserve to win the championship. So,
spoken like a true coach.
Absolutely.
Spoken like a true coach. I can imagine in the room you saying that if you guys throw away a 2-game lead, you don't deserve to win a championship. I won't celebrate.
Exactly. You don't. I mean, come on. You got to win one more game. They got to win 3. I mean, you do the math. So.
No, thank you. Thank you so much, Terry. I'm actually going to be ending now, but I appreciate you hopping onto the show, and thank you.
Thank you.